Hi, Shyam. How are you doing?
I'm good, Abhishek. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I think we have been talking about this for a while. And what's really stuck out, Shyam, we met recently. And what stood out in our initial conversation is your passion for automation. And it seems like it's just not job for you. You really think about it actively and very deeply. You're currently CIO and CISO at Nextdoor, pretty much spearheading everything. But previously, you were at Workato and Peloton, which is like very, very different companies, right? Like coming from hardware world and actually automation, doing automation at the automation company. You've pretty much seen automation from different angles. Is that fair to say? Security, business transformation.
Absolutely, Abhishek. I think what I feel is the company, like from different domains, different verticals, I think the problems are a bit similar, right? Like when you think from a problem standpoint. But yeah, like every company, like they have their same automation challenges, whether back office, front office. But I say this very fortunate to get that experience, hardware, SaaS. I also used to work on like Wall Street, so getting that financial services, fintech experience. So I think what I've realized is throughout my career journey, automation is a real problem, right? Like people talk about AI now, but I think automation is still a real problem. And every company goes through like different versions, iterations of it. So I would say very fortunate to have like this experience. And I think that experience is always making me think big picture, right? Like putting myself in the shoes of sellers, my business users, my customers, employees. So very fortunate from that standpoint.
Looking forward to a very interesting discussion. I know you have strong opinions, and we have had chatted about it in the past. I'm very curious, Sham. Scaling automations at very very different kind of companies. Is there a moment when these organizations realize that they need to stop putting money to outsourced effort or these points SaaS solutions, and then need to start building their own?
I think it's more of a realization for all these companies. I know like everyone wants to, of course, you have pressure from your board member, CEO, like let's automate this, let's talk about savings, let's focus on efficiency. But I think it's like a balanced, I would say, approach that I've seen these companies take, right? For example, I'll put myself in different shoes, right? Like, let's say if I'm a company where we are just embarking upon like automation, we have a lot of manual processes. I think outsourcing or going like the third party vendors, having builders on different platform would make sense, right? But if your company, tech first company, you use a lot of SaaS products, you have like talented IT. I wouldn't call myself or my like peers as IT. IT is business technology right nowadays because we are helping business solve the problems and we are using a mix of technology, right? So when you think from that lens, that perspective, I feel you need a balanced approach, right? Like if you are trying to solve existing problems, you have your business users, you have a BizTech team, they are at the edge. They are actually close to the problem. So it makes sense for them to maybe partner initially to sort of increase the velocity, but eventually take complete ownership, right, of these processes, automation. So I've seen like different journeys. Like for example, during Peloton days, COVID happened, natural calamity. We had to scale our processes across the lines of business, right? We do it internally, yes, but did we have the velocity capacity? No, right? So we had to take a balanced approach from that standpoint. So I would say it depends, but I think the way industry is moving with like automation, agentic, AI, and data, I think it's a interesting question that you're asking. It's a wake up call, I feel, right? Like have a balanced approach, but figure out like what are you getting out of it? Are you getting true ROI? Or it's just sort of a checklist you're trying to meet, right? Like sort of very heavily opinionated there.
Yeah, I think just to follow up there, Sham, with AI, when I talk to quite a few enterprise CIOs, certain CIOs are very almost hell bent to do it in house. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it could be multiple reasons. Maybe they want to do in-house because they are like heavily regulated. Number one, they are maybe there's this FOMO fear that maybe these sort of agentic automations are going to touch my crown jewel, right? Your ERPs, back office, financial. So I think that's one side of the story. And the other side is there's pressure from board to quickly move, right? And maybe at times, maybe the tooling talent is not there and they want to start quickly. My opinion is take a balanced approach personally, right? Like if you have team members who can be trained on automation journey or are interested, give them the chance to pick up on Agentic, start there. But if you need velocity, outsourcing is a good starting point or working with these vendors, right? But ultimately, I feel automation or AI is not just IT or BizTech problem, it's a business problem, right? So show your business users the direction, get them excited. I think the North Star is IT or BizTech starts, builds the architecture guardrail, but you have your business users, they should be building automations eventually. So I think that's the North Star. So answer your question, that would be a long-term strategy, right? But that makes sense, right? Especially if you're a heavily regulated industry.
And Sham, just on the follow up, right? So if we look at truly agentic multi-agent orchestration, right? They're still very different than the single agent automation companies, startups that I'm seeing. And multi-agent orchestration companies are very different than traditional RPA or workflow builders. Do you think organizations have the right expertise to actually go implement them, deal with the hallucinations, deal with two agents, talking to each other? It's not the same as connecting two workflow connectors, right? So how do you think about your staff? Like, how do you upgrade? How do you think about hiring in those areas?
That's an excellent question, Abhishek, right? Because everyone is moving fast with AI automation. And to your point, like, should I build single agents? Should I have all these agents talk to each other? I think it's a skill you would develop over time. So what I feel is, especially for your IT biz systems teams, we are always in the middle of all departments, right? HR, procurement, finance, or back office like marketing. So I think this team has some context. Like if I give a very simple example, right? Let's say you are a company that spends millions of dollars in marketing, right? And you are creating agents on the marketing space, but that marketing agent should have perspective from a Salesforce CRM perspective, right? Like what is our current pipeline with marketing? How much are we anticipating? So these agents should talk to each other directly, indirectly, right? So I think for folks like me, we are, how do I say it? Like we are brokers. We are these agents to talk to each other. But to answer your question, it's a skill that will develop over time, right? So you need to have a very strong sort of centralized team that play that role initially. But it's a problem that I'm also hearing about a lot from my peers, right? Agent sprawl, too many agents, maybe duplicate agents. How does one agent handle one thing to another agent, right? So I'm sorry, I'm giving a long-winded sort of response because I'm very passionate about this
No, no,
space.
I know, absolutely, Sham. I'm curious when you talk to your peers, Sham, here sitting in San Francisco, when I see startups, they're trying, really struggling to find good AI talent. As a CIO of sort of a, very exciting company, but not an AI native company, how do you think about hiring AI talent?
Before hiring, I would think about, can I upscale my existing talent, right? Like, can I give them the tools, ammunition so that they can upskill? But if you are working on like a very complex project that requires AI expertise, I think you need to have the right people for the right problem, right? But I think with AI, the good thing is you just don't need AI people or AI strong technical talent. You need people who can articulate well. They have like the business domain expertise, right? And they should also have this convincing ability because I think with agentic, things have become easier. What I mean to say is something that used to take a month now can take minutes, right? But understanding what the problem is, understanding the domain of the industry, I think that's where companies are. So to answer your question, that's what I'm hearing from my peers. Like it's not just AI talent, AI plus some domain expertise talent combined. Like that's like a match made in heaven.
Makes sense, Sham. I think just building on, I think what we chatted about earlier about, building in-house versus outsourcing it. What is your framework when you make this decision for a problem or a project, right? And when is the automation become strategic enough for you that you decide to go convince your leadership that I need to do this in-house and this is why we should make this investment?
Absolutely. So I would think of this in sort of multiple phases, right? Like, let's say if I am embarking upon sort of one department or one problem statement, right? So I would see, like, do I have the tools internally to start with? Number one is that, right? Do I have the right automation tools that I can start with? Do I have people who are willing to build automations, right? Not just from IT or biz tech perspective, but across lines of business. So if there is an appetite. Third thing is, if there's like a strong push, we have to save dollars, focus on efficiency. I think I would start with the sort of outsourcing route or consulting route just to get that velocity push, right? Get the expertise, figure out the framework, build a structure, and then use that as a launching pad for your teams, right? So, like a balanced approach. But I think the North Star is, once you figure out one problem statement, once you have that initial velocity, I think then it should be templatized, meaning like change management, how you do things from like deployment, it should be templatized. And the focus should be more on enablement. So that's a strategy I would take, right? Have the initial push, then show value to your leadership that we solved this problem, we took some consulting help, but now have the necessary understanding of the tool. Maybe we have a centralized automation tool, right? Maybe that could also be an answer. Maybe our automation strategy is across lines of business, right? And that's why I see this. I mean, I'm pretty sure you remember. I think CIO's job is becoming more fun these days because everyone is giving us a call. Like we used to have a seat at the table, but I think there is more excitement because or like that matchmaker, right? Like, oh, this problem, talk to this team, this automation, right? So North Star is build it in house eventually, right? But you need the right tool, upskilling. You need to focus on buying from your leadership, and it should be ROI, right? Not just doing it for like, oh, my peers are doing it, but how is it going to help with revenue? How is it going to help experience, right? I have my favorite XLA, experience level agreement. Am I reducing context switching for my end users, my customers, my prospects, right? So from that those lens.
I love your concept, Sham. I read your blog on XLA. It was like fantastic thought. The thought piece that you have. I'm curious, when you go to your CFO, how would they, Sham's like, quantify XLA? That's the answer you would get. And I come to you, Sham's like, oh, I have this wonderful product, Sham. You and I can understand XLA, but then you have to go to your leadership. How would a startup come and quantify it to you and the people who are spending dollars?
Absolutely. I mean, it's an excellent question because I feel the excellent definition changes by industry vertical. And I think the underlying sort of concept is I want less context switching for my user, right? It could be any user. That's number one. And I want to deliver happiness. Going to a CFO, the idea is I'll take an example, right? Let's say I'm planning to get a agentic tool for my company, right? So when I talk in terms of XLA, I would first define XLA that this team looks at 10 different systems to get to a particular outcome. With XLA, I'm reducing that number from maybe 10 to 3, 3 to 1, right? So that's number one. Second thing is I'm giving time back so that they can focus on like bigger projects, initiatives. So that's two. And the number three way of sort of thinking about XLA is if they are happy, they're going to give a good CSAT score to the service teams, right? So basically, you are saving time, delivering happiness, not for the person using it, but for the service, right? And basically, put like a dollar amount, like this is what you are spending time by. So that's how I would go with XLA, but it changes by department, right? Like XLA for a back office, like a finance system team, would be different than a CRM, sales, HR, dev team.
And Sham, that's an excellent point. And I see, and it completely makes sense, right? We've spent an immense amount of automation at Bolster, but it's never when you do automation, often people want to see immediate cost reduction. It's actually not true. It's actually costs go up, for a short while before it's like your costs never go down. Like if you're spending $100, it may go to 130, but over time you're just serving a whole lot more, right? Would you agree with that thesis, or you think an automation startup that you're going to bring in, you want 80% reduction today, unless you have a lot of services involved already? How do you think about that?
I think it depends on the business, right? Business or like the the domain they are in. But to your point, I would say yes, you bring in a new product, maybe that product is going to run parallelly with our existing process, right? So that sort of wrap up time. So absolutely agreed. But I think the goal is, I would say I've been like always right. I think we are never right. It's always a learning game. But what I've realized is when you make a bet on 10 products, maybe 6 or 7 will play out, but that experience will teach you something interesting. So my experience has been, don't just talk about efficiency in first 30, 60 days, right? Build like a plan for maybe 12 to 18 months, because for you to really show impact, it's like depends, right? If I'm a manufacturing company, like with all 50,000 employees, it may take maybe 12, 18 months, but after 18 months, the impact will be bigger, right? So that's will see true sort of savings, right? I think you summarized it well. The ramp up cost is higher, but with like 30, 60, 90-day goals, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months goal, right? So that's like a true way to quantify. And I think now with AI, it's very easy to sort of plan for it, right? So I would say I've been fortunate, but we all are learning every day.
Just follow up, Sham. Let's say you decide to go work at a new mid-sized company. I know Nextdoor doesn't want to hear it, but just let's as a sort of a practical exercise. And let's say it's us just framing up a problem. It's, let's say, a software company. How would you go about, what would your first 6 months look like to understand the automation needs? What do they actually require? What they should buy? What would be a framework, or anybody who's thinking in this sort of 1,000 people organization company, how they should they think about that?
Absolutely. I think when you are in IT or biz tech or like a CIO role, the main focus should be you have to be a good listener, right? Be a listener. So I think the first, whatever, like 30, 60 days, sort of talking to your lines of business, right? Ranging from like your field, like your front office, back office, right? Like I always put front office, back office, dev team, right? And so being a good listener, understanding current processes, that's one thing, right? The other thing would be I would not start sort of looking at automation as a first quarter thing. Maybe it's a second, third quarter thing, right? Like the framework, like you wanna first crawl, walk, run, and then fly, and sort of that strategy. But I think with now agentic automation, everyone feels that, oh, we have the superpower. Let's go, let's automate. I think that's not true. I think you still have to go back to your basics, listener, understand data. I think data tells a very good story. What I feel is not just surface level data, but your actual telemetry across whether endpoint, your what do you call ERP logs, Salesforce or CRM logs, right? I think that's another sort of a perspective because that will give you the backend perspective. And then getting like figuring out 6 small wins for the first year. I said because maybe you get 1 win for the first quarter as you wrap up 2 or 3 wins, right? So 6 wins first year, and actually putting definition of like a win according to IT might be different than win for a business, right? Putting that sort of agreement contract between both sides. So that's it. So I'm a big believer. Listener, data, have data contracts, data agreements, listen to look at your data, getting like at least 6 wins planned for the whole year, right? Then start showing impact. And while going through this journey, maybe you will buy a new tool, maybe, right? Maybe there's a hidden functionality in your existing tool. So sort of exploring that from a lens standpoint, and just being in the know, right? Like it's not like you speak to your business once. If you are deciding something, bounce the ideas with your stakeholders, get buy-in. I think once you build that trust, once you get that buy-in, people start appreciating what you're doing, and you will get more buy-in for like other initiatives. So that's a playbook that has worked, like from my experience, not just from a CI perspective, but over years.
Sham, most of your experience, would it be fair to say, is with a very tech forward companies? Is that fair to categorize?
Well, I would say yes and no, because I have worked at like SaaS companies, tech companies, but I've also worked on Wall Street, right? So like a different experience ball game altogether. But majority wise, yes. But like early in my career during consulting days, been fortunate to work with like a lot of energy customers or like factory customers. So I've a glimpse of how they operate in their day to day.
That's great, Sham. So when you think about those organizations, a lot of our conversations, and I know you're deeply, deeply passionate about building automations in-house, right? And I think even if we look at financial companies, even though they're not the core builders of software, they're still one of the earliest adopters of the latest and greatest. Like the whole financial world, mostly, right? Certain industries might be an exception, but that's not true when we look at energy, manufacturing, education, healthcare, right? How does your thinking think about, right? Like if you went became CIO of an energy company today, what would be your thought process to bring about automation and thinking about automation?
Yeah, I think for like your non-tech companies, like the way you describe energy manufacturing, I think it might be a bit different what I described. So where I'm going with this is, I think there you have to spend a lot of time being a listener for a longer duration of time, right? Because the volume, the processes might be, maybe it might still be on paper, right? Paper, maybe like very sort of your like SAPs of like 2000 time, right? Sorry, SAP, but I'm just making a reference here. But like, I think there you have to actually be on the field, talk to not just like department heads, actually take field trips to see how business operates, right? Like, I'll pick an example of manufacturing. And this sort of ties back to Peloton days, right? Like, getting shipment from like Asia all the way into the States to warehousing, right? It's a different ballgame because I call it the edge scenario, right? Like these folks are at the edge on the field employees. So I think there it might be a bit like heavy on first understanding the process, being a listener, and being a listener all the way up and down from a department, right? Like from field all the way to going up. And then I think there the opportunity to make impact is bigger, but you need to start with like very basic problems, right? Like I said, I think 6 wins for the first year. I think for these big companies, even if you can solve two problems, the dollar saving, impact, efficiency will be higher, right? Slightly different. And then I think for these companies, building in house may take time, but for the initial velocity, initial push, I think the approach of like outsourcing or going with like a vendor who has the I think that's important. Domain expertise is very important for vendors. I think that would be my suggestion because you are experimenting, right? And to experiment, maybe going with like a vendor might be easier to prove value, right? And then from there.
In that particular case, Sham, so when we look at certain automation framework company, it's very driven by very technical teams, and you yourself are like very hands-on, giving and being a CIO and being very hands-on. But would you prefer a different set of vendor where they can provide a lot of forward deployed engineering to you? And how do you think about forward deployed engineering today?
I think my definition of forward deployed engineering is maybe you get like packages or templates that you get from a vendor that you can basically plug and play into your business, right? I think that will speed up your journey from what I'm understanding, right? Because there the vendor already has some expertise about the domain. They have packaged things together. I think the experimentation will be faster. I think the scope for you to sort of make impact also becomes quicker, right? And I think in this agentic era, that is the right sort of strategy to move towards, right? Because uh, you are not starting from ground zero. You have advertise, it's plug and play. Of course, there might like you have to couple it properly with the existing flows and all that. But I think I would definitely support that theory, right? Like from speaking from that lens, because I'm learning from the expert. I'm basically getting like a template that can have quick impact, right? And quick ROI. So that would be my sort of approach.
So if you look at a lot of agents and people can say, you know, this is quick to develop, they're testing and deploying. And as we go into more companies where processes are not standardized and we don't have SaaS software, right? We're working with a lot of software built on SAP or Oracle or what, or maybe in-house applications. You would need some resources, and it's very hard to containerize and package templates, right? Like templates would be unique to you, even though it may be a very similar process within another logistic companies, your logistic company, it may be very different just because your applications are homegrown. So now, who do you expect to do this work, Sham? Would you go hire a person to do it internally? Or would you be okay with the software provider to provide few engineers to you? It's like, what would you prefer?
I think I would prefer the software vendor to provide resources, right? My definition is resource could be a human in the loop with AI, just a human being, right? It's mixed both because I think that's a problem that you should not be focusing a lot of energy and what do you call resources. At least give some building blocks. They can provide resources sort of combined, right? Again, basically going back to my theory around the initial push, right? So this is actually giving you a better push and also sort of filling the gaps for you, right? Because what you don't know. And like this vendor, because they have done this with other customers, they have more perspectives. So that would be one sort of strategy. But again, the flip side is maybe this is a 5-year project, right? And what I've heard is this happens at manufacturing company. Maybe they have budget to sort of deploy, right? So then I think it will be a partnership between both sides. But my preference is get the templates, get building blocks. If there are a lot of gaps, get the initial sort of help, right? From like whether it's resourcing help and embark upon your journey.
Just to follow up on that, some of the organizations I talk to, uh, they may not even have business processes that are written down. And that's where the starting point is. It's not like there's just so many steps that can be automated. It's just if we went and just created a checklist that these are the 30 things happening, we would just see efficiency gains by creating a checklist, right? And we figure out like what is redundant as we cut down the steps, right? So if that is the starting point as a startup, how do I go convince that you need something like an agentic automation? Like talking about with a real experience. So
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I think again, say going back to my point, right? Like you have to talk to the folks on the ground. Like you, first thing is people have this phobia, fear that oh, automation AI is here to take my job, right? I think you have to reinforce that it's actually going to give you more time to work on bigger things, right? So again, going back, like understanding their processes, as you mentioned, maybe it's on a paper, right? If it's on a paper, I think talking about agentic is you are jumping too ahead. I think using that to talk about data. Once your data layer is set up, then showing them vision around automation, right? It's a big picture thinking that you have to show there, right? Because I'm just going to put myself in the shoes of a manufacturing company, right? I think agentic sounds like a tiny object for them. Their thing is, man, like at least out of this 30 checklist items, fix two things for me, show me ROI, show me impact, right? And then sort of building from there. So I would sort of, they say, right, read your audience, read the room, taking that approach with this, right? That would be my sort of way to approach it.
anybody who is sort of listening to this as a CIO, what is the one actionable insight they should walk away from our conversation today?
I think one thing is still be a good listener, especially in the agentic automation era. Number one. Second thing is think about XLA across your lines of business. It's not something I've come across or I've developed. XLA is becoming an industry standard, right? If you're able to put XLA to practice, whether it's front office, back office, that mindset, I think that's going to get your teams excited. That's how I would sort of take away from this.
Thanks, Sham. So now switching to rapid fire questions, Sham. This one I changed it so I get the actual answer. What is the most overrated tech trend? And you have to be honest about it. It may drive some controversy, but
I think agentic automation is very heavily overrated, I feel. And what I want to say is like, again, not to create a controversy here, but I think agentic can be valuable to you. But if you're imagining that, oh, everything is going to be solved in like end to end using agentic, I think it's still work in progress. It's your story. Agentic is your story, and you have to make it work like magic. You won't start with 30 minutes. You will start with maybe one. From 1 week, you have to bring it to minutes. It's your story.
so I'm curious, Sham, why do you feel so strongly about it? Is it because you have not seen a vendor that has fulfilled that promise? or you have not seen the talent to do so? Because I have very, very different viewpoints on this. I'm curious why you feel that way.
What I feel is, again, right, the promise of agentic has been very big when I think about like 2024, 2025. I think people were anticipating that like with agentic, I can close my books in minutes, right? So I'm not saying that it's not possible. I think the reality is it's a building journey, building block. So people are anticipating that, oh, it's going to happen end to end, maybe in 2025. I think we are there, but not almost there, right? What I'm saying is it's good to get excited with the shiny object at time, but I would say ask the right questions, choose the right vendor, and make agentic your story.
Makes sense, Sham. And I'm curious, who is the one person or company that is doing automation in the newer sense that really impresses you, that you think other peers in industry should be watching out for? And you can't say Workato.
I'm a big fan of Netflix. I think I've been following Netflix blogs for almost, I think, 10, 12 years. So I think not just their XRE, CI/CD dev, but the things they do from IT perspective, right? It's very sort of open source mentality. I'm not just solving this for my company, I'm solving this for the industry. I think I respect that, right? Because when you are in IT biz tech, you are always at the mercy of vendors, the open source line. But I think Netflix is doing that. So I think huge kudos to them.
Yeah, I mean, they're like one of very, very, the built in-house culture at Netflix. So, okay, final question, Sham. What is your favorite guilty pleasure Netflix show or TV show?
I have watched Billions for multiple times, right? I don't know, like the energy, the way things are up there. I think it's like a AI sort of journey when you see Billions, right? Trying to go fast, trying to navigate the tough sort of market situation, right? So that's my favorite show. Like I've watched it twice till date.
Yeah, it is a great show. It's the one with the Axelrod, right?
Exactly.
Sham, this has been absolutely fantastic. I know we have to talk 6 months again. We may have different viewpoints on agentic automation. I would love to have another conversation with you. But again, thank you for coming in. Thank you for finding the time. It's a pleasure. Bye.
Thank you so much. You had like very insightful questions. So appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Take care.